Good morning, everyone. All right, we will call our March 23rd, 2023 meeting to order. And before we begin, I'd like to read a message. Excuse me, can I ask if your board member to please quiet yourselves? Thank you. This public meeting of the Philadelphia Board of Pensions and Retirement is being conducted in person in the board's conference room at the board's offices on the 16th floor of 2 Penn Center. Pursuant to section 21-1503 of the Philadelphia Code, electronic recordings of this meeting will be made through Microsoft Teams conference technology and by an audio recording. An electronic recording will be made available to the public at the board's website without charge within 10 days. Please note that you consent to such recording by attending, participating, or speaking at such meeting. Our first order of business is a motion to adopt the rules of order that the board has approved and used for its in-person public meetings that are electronically recorded. The purpose is to help ensure that accurate and complete audio or audiovisual recordings of this meeting occur to comply with the code's requirements. So for item 1, a motion to adopt the procedures for today's meeting have been made and properly seconded. Is there any discussion on this item? Hearing none, we'll go to the roll. Brian? Vanessa? Approved. Marcia? Approved. Sherilyn? Approved. Roosevelt?
Approved.
Paul?
Approved.
Andrea? Approved. And Carol? Approved. Motion carries unanimously. Item 2, a motion to approve the minutes from our February meeting was made and properly seconded. Any discussion? Hearing none, we'll go to the roll. Brian?
Approved.
Vanessa? Approved. Marcia? Approved. Sherilyn? Approved. Roosevelt?
Approved.
Paul?
Approved.
Andrea? Approved. And Carol? Our February minutes, yes.
Okay, all right. Approved.
Thank you. Motion carries unanimously. Item 3, a motion to approve 117 pension applications and 66 withdrawal applications has been made and seconded. Any discussion on this item? I'll move to the roll. Brian?
Approved.
Vanessa? Approved. Marcia? Approved. Sherilyn? Approved. Roosevelt?
Approved.
Paul?
Approved.
Andrea? Approved. And Carol?
Approved.
Motion carries unanimously. That moves us into section 4. 4A, a motion to approve the service-connected disability benefits for Bernard Nelson was made and seconded. Any discussion on this item? Hearing none, we'll move to the roll. Brian.
I approve.
Vanessa.
Deny.
Marcia.
Deny.
Sherilyn. Deny. Roosevelt.
Approve.
Paul.
I approve.
Sandra. Approve. And Carol.
Approve.
The motion carries 5-3. 4B, a motion to approve the service-connected disability benefits for Orlando Jewett was made and seconded. Any discussion on this item? Move to the roll. Brian.
I approve.
Vanessa.
Deny.
Marcia.
Deny.
Sherilyn. Deny. Roosevelt.
I approve.
Paul.
I approve.
Sandra. Approve. And Carol.
Approve.
The motion carries 5-3. 4C, a motion to approve the service-connected disability benefits for Anna Ritter was made and seconded. Any discussion on this item? Hearing none. Brian.
I approve.
Vanessa. Approve. Marcia.
Approve.
Sherilyn. Deny. Roosevelt.
I approve.
Paul.
I approve.
Andrea. Approve. And Carol.
Approve.
The motion carries 7-1. 4D, a motion to approve the service-connected disability benefits for Paul Bryson was made and seconded. Any discussion on this item? Hearing none, we'll go to the roll. Brian.
I approve.
Vanessa.
Deny.
Marcia.
Deny.
Sherilyn. Deny. Roosevelt.
I approve.
Paul.
Approve.
Andrea. Approve. And Carol.
Approve.
The motion carries 5-3. 4E, a motion to approve the service-connected disability benefits for Edwin Cruz was made and seconded. Any discussion on this item? Hearing now, we'll go to the roll. Brian.
I approve.
Vanessa.
Deny.
Marcia.
Deny.
Sherilyn. Deny. Roosevelt.
Approve.
Paul.
I approve.
Andrea. Deny. And Carol.
Approve.
The motion ties 4-4, and as chair, I will vote 2-9 to break the tie, so the motion fails 4-5. 4F, a motion to approve the service-connected disability benefits for Paul Rich was made and seconded. Any discussion on this item? Hearing none. Brian.
I approve.
Vanessa.
Deny.
Marcia.
Deny.
Sherilyn. Roosevelt.
I approve.
Paul.
I approve also.
Andrea. Approved. And Carol.
Approve.
The motion carries 5-3. 4G, a motion to approve the service-connected disability benefits for Tonya Johnson Nayati was made and seconded. Any discussion on this item? Hearing none, we'll go to the roll. Brian.
I approve.
Vanessa.
Deny.
Marcia.
Deny.
Sherilyn. Deny. Roosevelt.
I approve.
Paul.
I approve.
Andrea. Approved. And Carol.
Approve.
Motion carries 5-3. 4H, the motion to approve the service-connected disability benefits for John Wisniewski was made and seconded. Any discussion on this item?
I have one thing on this one. We have no medical records. Is this correct that there were no records or no information of him ever being treated at the employee disability program?
I think of the PPA, is you talking about?
Yeah.
So they don't, for some reason, they don't, is the right show, we don't do. Parking authority does their own.
And with,
You want me to answer
You can.
that? Yeah, Park Authority, they use travelers, sometimes they do not have internal injury reports the way the city does. And we did request them if you have not had any. We always request the report if you not have.
Okay. And no other medical records in this case.
Correct.
is there any other discussion on 4H? Hearing none, we'll do the roll call on the motion to approve 4H. Brian.
I approve.
Vanessa.
Deny.
Marcia.
Deny.
Sherilyn. Deny. Roosevelt.
I approve.
Paul.
I approve.
Andrea. Approved. And Carol.
Approve.
The motion carries 5-3. 4I, the motion to approve the service-connected disability benefits for Elston Woodward was made and seconded. Any discussion on this item? Hearing none, go to the roll. Brian.
I approve.
Vanessa.
Deny.
Marcia.
Deny.
Sherilyn. Deny. Roosevelt.
Approve.
Paul.
I approve.
Andrea.
Approved.
and Carol.
Approved.
Motion carries 5-3. Moves us to section 5. 5A, a motion to approve the application for service-connected disability benefits beyond the 1-year deadline for Joanne Conti was made and seconded. Any discussion on this item? Hearing none, we'll go to the roll. Brian?
I approve.
Vanessa?
Deny.
Marcia?
Deny.
Sherlyn? Deny. Roosevelt?
Approve.
Paul?
Approve.
Andrea? Approved. And Carol.
Approved.
Motion carries 5-3. 5B, a motion to approve the application for service-connected disability benefits beyond the 1-year deadline for Ruth Ann Evans was made and seconded. Any discussion on this item? Move to the roll. Brian?
I'll
Vanessa?
Deny.
Marcia?
Deny.
Sherlyn? Deny. Roosevelt?
abstain.
Paul?
I abstain.
Andrea? Deny. And Carol.
Abstain.
The motion fails 0-4 with, I'm sorry, 3 noted abstentions. 0-5.
4.
Wait. 0-4 with 4 noted abstentions. 5C, motion to approve the application for service-connected disability benefits beyond the 1-year deadline for James Newkirk was made and seconded. Any new discussion on this item? We'll move to the roll. Brian?
I approve.
Vanessa?
Deny.
Marcia?
Deny.
Sherlyn? Deny. Roosevelt?
I approve.
Paul?
I approve.
Andrea? Approved. And Carol.
Approved.
Motion carries 5-3. Section 6, 6A, a motion to approve the application to transfer pension plans for Shannon Stewart was made and seconded. Is there any discussion on this item?
So just to be clear, you had an opportunity to stay in the Wi-Fi plan, is that correct?
She had an opportunity to opt out of Plan 10, and everyone else did at the time. She failed to, she did accept the letter and the document certifying that she failed to respond.
So where the Wi-Fi coming in?
Because if she would have opted out of Plan 10, she would have been Wi-Fi.
That was the decision pre-Ben 16.
Right.
Right, I got that, but what I'm reading is the letter was sent to tell the opt-out plan 10 and not plan 16.
That was subsequent. So when she was first hired, she was back when people had to opt out of Plan 10.
Mm-hmm.
She failed to do so.
Okay,
And then later, she did take advantage of the opportunity to opt out of Plan 10 into Plan 16. At some point subsequent to that, someone at PPA told her, why you should be Plan Y. It's not correct. That's how this really back.
okay, thank you.
Any other discussion on 6A? We'll go to the roll for the motion to approve 6A. Brian?
I'll
Vanessa?
Deny.
No, I'm sorry. Marcia?
Deny.
Sherlyn? Deny. Roosevelt?
deny.
Paul?
I deny.
Andrea? Deny. And Carol.
No.
Motion fails 0-7 with 1 voted abstention. Section 7, 7A, a motion to approve the application for survivorship benefits for Mark Baker regarding the deceased David Baker was made and seconded. Any discussion on this item? Hearing none, we'll go to the roll. Brian?
I approve.
Vanessa?
Approved.
Marcia?
Approved.
Sherlyn? Approved. Roosevelt?
Approve.
Paul?
I approve.
Andrea? Approved. And Carol. Motion carries unanimously. Brings us into old business, section 8A. Motion to approve the application for service-connected disability beyond the 1-year deadline for Wayne Brunson was made and seconded. Is there any discussion on this item? Hearing none, we'll go to the roll. Brian?
I'll abstain.
Vanessa?
Deny.
Marcia?
Deny.
Sherlyn? Deny. Roosevelt?
Abstain.
Paul?
I abstain.
Andrea? And Carol. Motion fails 0-4 with 4 noted abstentions. 8B, a motion to approve the application for service connected disability beyond the 1 year deadline for Latrice Burrell regarding was made and properly seconded. Any discussion on this thing? Hearing none, we'll go to the roll. Brian?
Hope.
Vanessa?
Deny.
Marcia?
Deny.
Sherilyn? Deny. Roosevelt?
Abstain.
Paul?
Abstain.
Andrea? Deny. And Carol?
Abstain.
Motion fails 0-4 with 4 voted abstentions. 8C, a motion to approve the application for option 4 survivorship benefits for William Ludwig regarding Charles Rawl, the deceased, was made and seconded. Is there any discussion on this item? Hearing none, we'll go to the roll. Brian?
Approve.
Vanessa?
Approved.
Marcia?
Approved.
Sherilyn? Approved. Roosevelt?
Approve.
Paul?
I approve.
Andrew? Approved. And Karen?
Approved.
Motion carries unanimously. 8D, a motion to approve the application for service-connected disability benefits beyond the 1 year deadline for Eric Skelton was made and seconded. Any discussion on this thing? We'll move to the roll. Brian?
I approve.
Vanessa?
Deny.
Marcia?
Deny.
Sherilyn? Denied. Roosevelt?
I approve.
Paul?
I approve.
Andrea? Approved. And Carol?
Approved.
Motion carries 5-3. Brings us to new business and the executive director.
The NC PERS, once again, awarded us a certificate of transparency for participating in the survey. They see on the shop, to be honest. NC PERS Blue Organization provides a lot of information for public employee pension funds. And we're always glad to participate in their survey. As other public pension funds do, because it provides good information to everyone out there involved in this. The medical panel RFP is posted on March 6th. The closes on April 6th. It's a supplemental RFP, meaning that Juris does not have to respond again. It's to enhance what we already have. So we're hopeful. We did send out notices to probably about 3 pages of additional medical providers. So we're hoping that we do get some additional response just to bolster what we have. That does not include specialists, by the way. They're not some of this on. City council budget testimony was initially going to be virtual. Changed the line, not in person, and we are scheduled for the next Wednesday, 29th, sometime in the afternoon. Just give us a range of 1 to 4. No, that's just for the treasurer's office and ourselves and the city department. The pension adjustment fund work continues. We're making good progress. We do not have the multiplier yet. As soon as I get that, as I indicated, I will get that to you. I did communicate yesterday with the actuary with Chiron, and we should be getting the multiplier soon. I said May, June, may be closer to June, since we have a number of quadros and things like that to get out, but we're still looking at that time frame. But if you're going to tell anybody, I would err on the side of June as opposed to May. The actuary report, we will have, it's almost the end of March, so that's by next week, probably the end of next week. Kyra is working on that. The papers for informed, I don't know, we think you have that in the materials. There's a virtual forum on the 17th and 18th of May, and then an in-person forum on the 23rd and 24th of May. If anyone's interested in that, it's for us to make the motion for that. If you want to make contact with us, if anyone has a motion for that.
I'll make the motion, but I want to return the papers to one. Second.
Motion regarding attendance of the papers forum was made and properly seconded and discussion. Hearing none, go to the roll. Brian?
I approve.
Vanessa? Approved. Marcia? Approved. Sherilyn? Approved. Roosevelt?
Approved.
Paul?
Approved.
Andrea? Approved. And Carol?
Approved.
Motion carries unanimously.
That's everything I had to report this month.
Great, thanks, Fred. Carol?
So, papers, Fran, or maybe Chris, I don't know, but do we still hold the seat on papers on the board?
Well, I think Bill sits on the seat of papers. I'm not sure of the composition of the board. Bill may be able to tell us about what the composition is.
So I was the treasurer, now I'm the vice president, and I do have a seat on there. There's 9 that sit from all over the state, and then there's an advisory board that's made up of different consultants and lawyers and other people that advise. So we do have that seat, and I've been there for 15 years or so.
Is that?
So I just got a second question, so, when Bill retired, the seat was under the controller's office. So, how do we appoint? How do we appoint? I know he was, and he was the whole time, he was, on the board.
I don't control that seat. I don't know if it's a board seat or not. I don't think it's a designated board seat in Philadelphia. I've never appointed anyone to that.
No, you didn't, Fran, actually, you did not do it, you was not, when it first came up, you wasn't the executive director, so it's been a position at time, but it's been a position. And I don't want to, don't get me wrong, I just want to stay on track that it's been a trustee position and it's been under the control, like, so Harvey had it for years. And, him and Joanne shared it. So if everybody's fine with Bill, I'm fine with Bill, but I'm just saying that hasn't been always the makeup of that board. And I just wanted to know, because I know Bill had retired, we did bring him back, but what happened with the seat? So once he retired. That's all. And then my other question is too, the legislative committee, I asked Ray about this other day, so maybe I need to direct it to that one.
I think I want to be clear.
So the legislative committee met, and then we had put some things on hold that you're supposed to get back to us. It's been a while now, so I'm trying to see what the status of the outcome of the issues that we asked about.
So, there were a couple of issues. The primary one that Pensions has any authority over at all is, had to do with the cost of interest for purchasing city time if you return to employment. And I did have a preliminary discussion with Carl Haney, who's unfortunately somewhat backed up, but it is subject to collective bargaining. So there's really, Pensions can't make a decision like that, and even city council would, any change in that would still have to be collectively bargained.
Is the interest initially collectively bargained, are you saying that?
Everything having to do with pensions is collectively.
Who set the interest rate? Is Carla Lahane suggesting that it was set through the collective bargaining process? Is that what you're saying?
That whether there is interest or not, as enshrined in the code and approved through collective bargaining, is subject to collective bargaining. It's just unilaterally, it's also, so.
The interest rate is the rate of return. So who sets the rate of return?
Are you referring to the code provision? I'm talking about the code provision and whether people would be charged interest or not. It's not the
I don't think
amount.
that's collective bargaining.
I'm sorry?
Code provision is not bargaining.
Pension,
Okay.
Carla likes to hear that answer.
things related to the pension are collectively bargained.
It's not about the rate, it's about whether it's charged or not.
It is about the rate. The question at the legislative committee is how can we offset or reduce the rate? It was about the rate, and you said that you think all that's collective bargaining. You had to look into whether it was collective bargaining, but, all right, you gave me my.
I will talk to her again, but I understand your question differently. The code provision requires that people be charged interest. You were asking that that interest be reduced. The code provision says what it says, and that would have to be bargained. That is my
And then that's what he said, who sets the rate?
That's a
The code is
different-
set,
The
no,
rates are general.
okay. And then the other one was about, health and welfare.
Right, and I think that's the,
Okay. Is that if a person is unemployed for a year and they come back, they have to work another whole 10 years before they qualify for health and welfare benefits.
Yeah, Carol, that's not, that would be civil service commission.
Yeah, that's what she just said, man. Look,
She said,
yeah. You did.
Oh, we can have an offline conversation.
Okay, we can have an online conversation.
And then if you
Because I already
agree with
talked-
what I say, then you can talk, we can talk further.
Okay.
I hadn't had any discussion about that.
Was you on the legislative committee?
No,
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. No, I'm sorry. I just say some questions that, and most of the questions that came up, they kept saying it's collective bargaining, so I was just waiting for the answers for a while, even though when I talked to people, they said it's not collective bargaining, so I guess it's an issue that I gotta take with you, or I'll talk to you about
yeah,
that.
you can talk to me about that, yes.
Thank you.
Any other new business? That moves us to the litigation summary on any notable updates.
well, first of all, I'd like to introduce Ryan Mulder, who is in the law department in the labor unit and has been handling some benefits matters. And in fact, he handled one of the cases that is on the litigation summary this week, and he got it dismissed even before oral argument. So,
Thank you, welcome.
and that's really the only significant news. We have a couple more cases. They fluctuate.
Ryan, what is your last name?
It's public.
N-U-L-G-R-E-W.
Bargaining, Devin.
Any other questions on litigation summary? Hearing none, motion to adjourn has been made and seconded, and hearing no objections, that motion carries unanimously, and we're going to move into the deferred compensation portion of the meeting. Okay, our first item of business is motion to approve the minutes from our February meeting. That motion was made and properly seconded. Any discussion? Hearing none, we'll go to the roll. Brian? Vanessa? Approved. Marcia? Approved. Roosevelt?
Approved.
Paul?
I approve.
Andrea? Approved. And Carol?
Approved.
I'm sorry, Carolyn. Motion carries unanimously. And this is item 2, the deferred comp plan update.
Good morning.
Good morning.
City of Philadelphia Deferred Compensation Plan as of February 28th, ending balance was $1,616,050,063.64. That was 1% less than the month of January. Total participant count is 24,994. That's 26 more participants than January. Actively deferring is 19,397, 17 more than the previous month. Regarding new enrollments, we received 133 new enrollments. Year to date, that's about 267. which is about 9% more than last year. Inactive count, 5,597. At the last board meeting, Fran had asked us to really look at the inactive count to identify how many participants were terminated or are still employed but have stopped their contributions. So I just want to thank Bill Rubin. We provided him with an entire list, and he's going through the list to identify the active as well as those terminated, so that we have, an updated information in our record system. And then we will do an outreach effort regarding the Restart campaign to those employees that are still active. Regarding the new enrollments in Philadelphia Parking Authority, there were 2 new enrollments received in the month of February with a total participant count of 457. The Philadelphia Housing Development Corporation, 0 enrollments with total participant count of 46. In the 401A plan at the end of February, the ending balance was $2,280,474.97. That is around 3% less than last year. So it's the executive summary page. 948 participants, which is 3 less than the previous month. Call volumes did decrease in the month of February, which is aligned with what we see in that month. Total calls handled was 2,948, which is 617 less than January, which is January is the statement period, so we don't see as many calls. Online account, 18,608 participants. That's about 61 more than the previous month. So currently there's 74% participants that have set up an online account and are leveraging the tools and resources that are available on the website. Percentage option, 1521 participants have elected a percentage option. That's an increase of 120 more participants since the month of January. And in the Roth, which is the after-tax contributions, there are 5,280 participants. That's an increase of 126 more participants than January, with total plan assets of $34.2 million. I just want to take the opportunity, last October, this education subcommittee met and reviewed all the education initiatives. One of the initiatives that the committee had reviewed was the virtual financial wellness courtyard. It's a 3D interactive experience that's customized for the city of Philadelphia, where people can engage, enroll in a fun digital way, but it allows them to not only look at webinars, education aspects of engagement, like, for example, the investment smoothie bar or gardening, but it's helping them understand in a fun, engaging way to not only enroll, but learn more about the plans and leverage the tools and resources, manage their account, review their asset allocation, but also, most importantly, meet with the retirement specialist. This 3D interactive experience is ready to go live April 1, but we asked for the city to help us in terms of sending a link out to all employees so they can interact with this experience. We can provide you with a link, and then we will also share the metrics of how your employees are doing and where they're actually viewing. So this is a very important tool that will help out in terms of raising brand awareness.
Yes, we can do that through the employee newsletter.
I'll send you the flyer, and we can go live if all is good.
And Fran, we can put it, can we put it in our employee, we can really start out with February.
It's at the printers now, give it to us quickly, and maybe able to include it.
It's a live link, is that okay? So the flyer has to go out with the link or the communication by email.
Yeah, so ours, no, we're sending actually a paper.
Mhm.
But we can put the link on the website also.
Excellent. Thank you so much.
And we do actually have a
a page in the pension newsletter, thanks to Fran and Shahid, that is at the printer that'll be going out, and that's focused on reviewing asset allocation for participants. As Brian brought up a couple of months ago, the high volume of folks in the fixed account in the city. So we thought it'd be a great opportunity to not only advertise the representatives, including the CFP, Don, as being available, but also the importance of reviewing your asset allocation as an individual investor.
Any other questions about it?
Thanks, Nina. As far as the local office activity, for the month of February, we had 198 individual one-on-one meetings, 63 enrollments out of those one-on-one meetings in February. There were 21 workshops with 441 attendees. Two things that I just want to, these two things will show up on next month's report, but they just happened and they're pretty impressive, so I just want to make sure everybody is aware. I want to thank Marcia and her team, specifically Jackie Ajosi, who sets up the lunch and learns with the city. We did a deferred comp retirement one-on-one lunch and learn last week, and we had 289 attendees to that webinar that was conducted by Don, our CFP. And then I also want to call out, the last 2 weeks was the Philadelphia Parking Authority open enrollment period. And during that open enrollment period, the local team conducted 15 visits to those different parking authority facilities and enrolled 68 members during those visits, which total participation in the plan is 457. So 68 enrollments over the course of 2 weeks is a pretty big number. Thank you.
Great, thanks, Brad. Any other questions for me?
Same question, Brad. This is not meant to be a shot. I've seen your presentation. It's good. 12 new employee orientations, 186 folks, only 71 signed up, which is what, 40%? And a disconnect, because that's where you got to get them right there, right? And I don't mean that from a sales perspective. I believe this is a critical piece of their retirement.
100%. And one thing that I have to do, Brian, and since this is the first time we've included this on the report, is I have to dive a little deeper, admittedly, to how many of those 186 attendees were already in the plan.
Right.
Because there are some folks that, let's say, we go to a new employee orientation at the streets department on their first day, we sign them up. Then 2 weeks later, they go to a DC 33 new employee orientation. We talk to them there. So they're counted as attendees at both. So I can dive a little deeper into that number for you because it's a very valuable number to know.
It is. If we're batting 40%, it's a problem. We have to adjust our approach. And I don't know, I feel like when you come to police or fire, it's close to 100%, right?
Yep.
And there's a reason. So we have to figure out what's the reason and how can we make it work for the DC 33 and the crossing guards. That's all. But if what you're saying is true, then never mind.
Absolutely. I will dive a little deeper and let you know next month.
And that's a good point because they could be in 33, get promoted in 47, they can remember the rotation in 47, you already just seen in 33.
Sure.
So you're counting like 2 or 3 times, so that it might be, 40% is probably a good number for that large of people because 33 people will get promoted in 47 and then in 9 reps and so on. So we keep traveling, we all just be in one.
But one thing we could look at, and I made a note of this, is look at the total number of hires each month in the city. So we know there's a lag time between orientations and hiring. So what we could do is look at, because we know maybe there's a 2-month lag between people going through the orientation process and hiring. So look at that standard and say, okay, we've hired X number of people in January. What do the numbers look like in terms of the number of orientations? What do the numbers look like? What is our take-up rate? And then figure out the percentage and see, just from a comparison basis, what should be the goal? What is the norm in terms of the take-up rate for deferred compensation piece? Because one of the things we talked about is this is a very important piece for people enrolled in the hybrid plan, and to make that more important. And I think one of the goals of the educational committee is to really focus on that so that we can get some concrete numbers, go to the unions and work really hand in hand with them to get that done. So we're going to be starting that process.
So Marcia, you're talking about just the new hire, not the promotion?
Yes,
It's
Just
a
new
new
hires,
hire.
because I think that's a clearer
It will
number,
clear
I
it down
think, in
some,
terms of just, all in, because we will take out those folks who are promoted and that sort of thing.
Absolutely.
Thanks, Brad, much. Any other discussion? Okay. Motion to adjourn deferred comp is made and seconded. Any discussion? Hearing none. Adjourn and move into the rest.
Let's call the investment meeting, session. The first item on the agenda is minutes of February. The second, the agenda approved. Call the roll, Brian. Vanessa. Martha. Carolyn. Roosevelt. Paul. Anita. And Carol.
Approved.
Motion carries. Thank you all very much. That takes us to minutes item 2, which is the investment performance report.
Thanks, Rob. Good morning, everyone.
Morning.
So just a few things. I know I've talked to a few of you before we talk about the numbers. I think it's important just in light of the recent, overall developments in the market, the banking situation here and over in Europe. And then some of the articles that have been circulating about, other pension plans, just to cover and confirm, how limited our exposure was to some of the banks that you probably read about. So you've seen obviously SVB, Silicon Valley Bank, failed back on Friday, March 10th. And then Signature Bank, primarily in New York, 2 days later, also was shuttered. And that was, those two were somewhat related to a lot of withdrawals from Signature following SVB. Important to note that less than $557,000 in total, or 0.01% of assets, were in high-yield banks, and that was entirely as the result of just standard equity exposure in index funds. To me, there's a couple things. One, obviously, active managers want to invest in them, and just how little weight those carry for the whole fund and index funds as well. Then you've probably also seen news around UBS and Credit Suisse. That merger or buyout took place. There was a lot of financial instability with Credit Suisse. Quite frankly, that bank has had issues going back probably over a decade since the financial longer. Again, exposure to Credit Suisse extremely minimal. Again, 0.01% of assets are just over $600,000. Bulk of that being Northern Trust, again, an index provider, and then just a couple of small bond positions. And so again, very minimal holding there. UBS, who is the acquiring bank, only about 0.07% of assets. Obviously, the bank continues to function, no reported issues there. We've continued to track some of the other regional banks that you may have read about in terms of what problems they could be having. One of the names that's cropped up is First Republic. That's one of the ones that we're following as well. Assets there even smaller, about 0.002%. So again, I think it's important to point out, because I know folks read these things about other pension plans, they see big numbers, they get concerned, but relative to the overall size of the fund, we're talking about extremely limited exposure to those entities.
Banking industry in general.
Yeah, so there's a few things going on, and we've been in regular contact with a lot of our managers, both on the equity side, the bond side, and then some of the private equity managers as well. When SVB in particular collapsed, there was a lot of concern, and justifiably so, because of how much capital was held there and how many private equity firms used that bank. By some estimates, about 40% of all private equity funds had at least some money in that bank. I think the good news is because
the Fed, FDIC, et cetera, decided to backstop that bank. Any client assets, regardless of whether they're theirs, others, underlying portfolios, no losses there. What you started to see rather quickly is that a lot of those private equity funds and others have begun to reassess their banking relationships. They're setting up multiple kind of backstops or fail-safes, engaging with multiple banks. We did also talk to private equity funds or private debt funds. I think were ahead of the curve. Some, for example, who were using just one regional bank, doing so in such a way that they were splitting their accounts multiple tranches of 250,000 in a way that then that money was being lent out or invested through other banks, so all of it was protected. So I think some folks have been really ahead of the curve on this. There's no losses to fund assets as a result of any of the private equity action that we expect. And I think the firms and the funds that I've spoken to are quickly assessing their relationships and how they're going forward. One thing that just kind of came out in the last couple of days too, I did want to mention about Credit Suisse. And again, this seems to be limited to Switzerland, but it is an interesting thing that gets used as a precedent going forward. And that was that when Credit Suisse was bought out by UBS, the normal kind of order of things that bondholders are paid first, and an equity shareholder are usually wiped out at whatever is left. There was a special kind of bond, in this case it's called an AT1. They're convertible, contingent convertible bonds. The Swiss decided to wipe the bondholders out first, at least these bondholders, and pay them. Again, it seems to be limited only to Switzerland. Some of the Eurozone countries have really distanced themselves from that, saying that's not how they would handle things or applying that. But it is interesting to keep an eye on if that gets used as a precedent going forward, because folks I think would have to reassess kind of their risk reward in certain bonds if that's the way done in the future.
What exposures do we have to other banks through other managers or indexes?
So the primary non-index exposure would be in two places. Certainly global road law, and I was going to cover that when we talked about the sources, just kind of more banking exposure there. And then obviously Elizabeth Park, that deals primarily in micro cap banks and regional. That's 100% there. We have talked to Fred as recently as Monday, and he did do yesterday, Tuesday, which I sent out the clips of. Was consistent with everything that he and I spoke about. I think in the short term, you'll see that portfolio take a hit, although perhaps not as much longer. Banking indexes are increasing. It's important to that position is a really small part of our. If things go as he believes they will, if not as many banks as people think raise capital, things stabilize in first and second quarter, kind of charge-offs or write-downs are small, that he expects to see to be a real opportunity. There's a lot of banks trading for less than book value, even including some of their potential losses. So I think their largest position right now is in Texas Capital. I think at last time I talked, it was trading at 96% of book value. Meaning based on the kind of standard metrics, that would be, potentially a really good buying opportunity if things go the way he anticipates. He's taken the opportunity to cover shorts. We got out of First Republic and some other positions last week before additional news came out. And we've been through this before where, that fund didn't do really well for a while. This year showed a lot of patience and rewarded because his returns and what we call went really good for a long time. So I would urge at least for the company, to show patience at this point.
Very Swiss situation. I'll have to advise. Is there not a hierarchy of what rules concerning who gets paid out first? With certain capital structures?
There
Or
is.
is it country by country? How's that work?
Well, there is, and then it's also bond specific. And Dave and I were talking a little, and he's read up on it. I think, if I understood what happened correctly, the Swiss may have passed some regulations or made some changes the night before they did this. I believe that's what.
Well, I don't think these things in your system.
I believe that's what happened, but
Maybe the
yeah.
solicitor would like to comment on that.
But generally speaking, now again, these bonds were of a lower tier, they were junior debt. So depending on what the contract says, other things can be given priority. But, I'm just quoting from an article I read this morning, the Single Resolution Board, the European Banking Authority, and ECB Banking Supervision all said, according to statement Monday, that common equity instruments are the first ones to absorb losses, and only after they're fully used to Tier 1 be required to. So this does at this point seem to be limited to Swiss. The concern would be, they say that now, that if something happens in the future, will they then come back and rely on this as a precedent? I just think it's something that bond managers, consult with staff, as we're evaluating, talking to managers, need on to this precedent.
Without our regulations, as you said.
Correct. Is that accurate to your understanding?
Yeah, the only other point is Switzerland is not part of the European Union, so they are able to operate autonomously. Their position will be litigated heavily. I think it's probably safe to assume that for all other European countries, the AT1s would fall senior in hierarchy. Very unusual circumstances.
Yes, you have to invest, you have to something to rely on. Correct. Concerning giving up return for reduced risk, that's a trade-off. That disappears.
Yeah, if there's enough fewer investors on board.
Yeah, some folks, obviously not folks that were invested in it, not yet, but, we're buying these bonds in a distressed situation, believing that they would get paid or get paid some greater amount later, therefore now the most affected and most likely to litigate. And I think it's going to be a multi-country, multi-jurisdiction. That's another country, along with Switzerland, for a while.
So with the, reserve money or the government, having banks buy into First Republic, did they kind of balance them out or?
So on the March 12th, the Federal Reserve and Treasury and FDIC announced that they would fully backstop all banks to prevent further loan of bank, which basically means that they will allow banks to honor their depositor withdrawals based on the full face value of their collateral. And the underpinning issue of this entire crisis comes down to really two things: incredibly poor risk management, or in the case of Silicon Valley Bank, no risk management. They had no chief risk officer for 8 months, and the very questionable oversight practices, particularly from Arcadia. And then just a mismanagement of assets and liabilities. Depositor withdrawals are called within a moment's notice. They have access to their cash, buying longer duration bonds, and obviously the interest rates went up, bond prices came down, incredibly mismanaged. By honoring or backstopping that gives more faith and credibility to the banking system and causes a loan bank, or in this case, cease to be taken.
But First Republic was almost in the same place as SBC, right?
That's right.
So then, I guess my question was by the other banks lending them the money, that kind of even this, yeah. Did that help stabilize them?
It did. Basically, contagion risk was.
I don't know, we don't have no investment in First Republic, right? But I know a lot of small people who have, not so small people, it's a small bank, but a lot of,
No, we said it was small investment.
Oh.
0.007.
And also I know, employees are in that bank too, so that was,
The issue in Dave obviously is that if you looked at First Republic's balance sheet relative to SVB, which, weekend this happened, obviously talking, also talking, way doing a couple of managers. I just pulled like a summary of First Republic Bank's kind of balance sheet. So the naked eye, or like not going through the whole 400 pages, they look to be in much better shape. You kind of look at their assets, the liabilities, and their interest. The problem is that contagion like this, or at least the rumor run on banks, it's like a wildfire. If somebody just kind of whispers, there's a cartoon from, of all places, The Simpsons, kind of circulating about like how a bank run can start, and it's funny when you see it, but that really is what happened. So folks looked at SVB and they said, "Oh, well, First Republic does a lot of business, private equity and Silicon," and immediately it just started a panic, and their stock dropped 60-70% in one day. If you actually looked at the balance sheet, you might have concluded something different. But when it's people's money, as Carol's saying, kind of, it gets very emotional, you get very scared. If you have millions of other banking options, kind of natural thing to do is pull your money and put it somewhere else. So that can cause these things sometimes to be worse than the underlying metrics. Yeah.
Interesting article. Yesterday was about raising the level of protection by $250,000, but below $1 billion. It was launched. And the idea was that that's intended to protect the venture capitalists, hedge fund people who are in that space, as far as disease, which you alluded to. That money goes away. That's a big one.
They push back on that. They can talk to the money and we can
Push back by saying we are not like depositors.
She had said something a little different.
Which is what Dave
Before.
said.
Dave and I were talking a little bit too. I mean, Goldman, for example, has come out and said kind of all this banking crisis is going to potentially lead to 30, 40 points off GDP, potentially is their estimate. If things kind of continue, and and what I said to Dave is, I kind of wonder if the government backstops more and more things, if that won't necessarily just encourage more. So you have to think about it. You have to think about it both ways. And I'm not suggesting that that proposal is wrong. I actually think there's some merit to it. But there are interesting studies, academic studies out there that talk about how bank runs and kind of these kind of contagion or overall risk can get worse the more insurance you get, right? Because then people don't have to worry about risk. Individual investors or these, hedge funds or other things, they don't kind of have to worry about it. I think it's very important, as you're talking about, for smaller investors or smaller businesses. I think that proposal makes some sense. But when you talk about, and I know you're not saying that, but when other people talk about backstopping everything, to me, that potentially just encourages more risk. Then you don't need the risk officer. SVB was ahead of the curve. Why have one?
That's what the article ultimately concluded.
Right.
And that what I said was in the middle of it.
Yeah.
Ultimately, it's a moral hazard.
Right.
And you don't need to pay $500 million to a risk manager. To make
Right.
sure, because you already have our backstop.
Right. So it's going to be very interesting, and I think that's why you're seeing the markets gyrate as much as they did. It kind of went up when the interest rate announcement was made yesterday. Then it plummeted by the end of the day, down 500 points. Last I looked, it was up this morning. Again, regardless of your political beliefs or you believe what should be done, I just don't get the sense that on the right, on the left of the center, there's a lot of confidence. Those running, because they seem to issue some contradictory statements or statements that are confusing about what steps they might take. And the market definitely doesn't take uncertainty. That's what's driving a lot of just on the numbers quickly, 2% negative for the month, directly in line with the benchmark for February. Should have received estimates yesterday, down slightly, about 40 basis points for the month as of the 21st, even with the benchmark fiscal year to date, just behind the benchmark, up around 3.4%. No significant or actionable concerns with any of the managers. Did want to note, just as a result of a couple of questions we got, Tyrone, myself, Marquette next month, do a short review of Brandywine, just specifically how they're benchmarked. And it's not a problem with the manager, it's not a performance issue, but their benchmark, just given what they do, I know we've talked about this before, may or may not be the best way to think about them. So we're going to just talk about their underlying holdings, their strategy a little bit, and maybe how folks think about judging them, you know, in a broader context. Going forward.
Chris, just back to the banks for 1 second, sure. Just, I know you, me, Tyrone, Byrne, personally, I know the amount of time we can have, so, as you always do on the portfolio, but any questions that we've had or anything, we've had really quick answers. So, it's good to know that you know, that consultant staff are on top of the issues and really having so it's good work.
Yes, agreed. Thank you.
The staff's done a great job. They're extremely responsive. Marquette, whether it's on the weekends or you know, later into the evening, they'll respond quickly and put stuff together. So no other comments. Managers, you know, folks. If you look at the individual asset classes, they're either just above, just below, right in line with the benchmarks for the month. So again, no concerns. Is there any other performance or questions? Staff reports, securities lending for February, just under $125,000 for the month, 52.19 million since the board started the program. No significant changes month over month in diversity or local AUM, 15% on a combined basis. NWBD managers broken out as their own group, 53.2, and local and surrounding suburb managers just under 10%. Upcoming board meetings, April 27th, May 25th, June 22nd. And then the last listed item on the staff report is the recommended allocation, the sources and uses for the $570 million RRP payment that the board received from the city on March 10th. So just a couple things to keep in mind that I think are important. The cash balance is roughly in total around $938 million when you include that, the RRP payment. That cash, regardless of the amount that's in there, the interest rate that's being earned on that as of this morning is just under 4.5%. So think about what's earning now, these would be what's earning perhaps a year ago. It's pretty high. And I think that impacts how we think about who or which manager should get the money and kind of the timing that they should get it. When you see that much volatility in the markets, there's interest rate uncertainty when you're getting that nearly 4.5% in that overnight account. It's our view you can be a little more judicious with the speed that some of the managers receive that money. You'll see Marquette recommends that the rebalancing, and we agree, occur over a period of about 2 quarters. We'll do it in tranches, subject to market conditions, and then this will allow us to continue to keep keep a prudent amount of cash, as well as adjust, if market conditions warranted, we'd be able to come back, over that six months and, tweak or make adjustments with the board's approval.
Where would you wind up?
If we were to do everything that's in this, just, let's say we, instead of doing it over 2 quarters, Robbie did it, tomorrow.
Right.
And kept everything else even, we'd end up with around $471 million in cash. We pay out benefits roughly $70 million. So you're still talking over almost 7 months around of benefit payments. So you're still talking about a pretty significant level of cash. And again, it's earning a pretty nice coupon, at the moment. So we would recommend 3 fixed income managers receive $62 million each. Garcia, Hamilton, Longfellow, Rumline.
Is that based on where we are against allocation?
Yes, and if you look at the second page that Mark had put together, you'll see where the allocation was on February 28th. What the allocation changed to when the RRP payment was added in, what the allocation would look like if you exclude the cash reserve, and where the targets are. So that should give a good sense of what things would look like. The next 2 managers recommended are the global low volatility managers, Fidelity and MFS. I know, in terms of the banking exposure, I know when the managers were first hired and it's come up, since then, what's the banks, or what's the managers, exposure to banks? Both those managers are largely in line with the underlying benchmark. So as of the 17th of March, Fidelity has about 5.6% exposure to banks. The index is around 5.56. MFS is at 5.85 exposure, again, index is 5.56. Interestingly, in both cases, particularly for Fidelity, even though they're in line with the benchmark index, both of them have less exposure to U.S. banks than the underlying index. They're close to the index in total, but they're weighting things a little bit differently. So I just thought that was important for folks to know, given prior questions.
Where does this put us, especially for our target?
So I believe, just go back to the. Yeah, we do. I believe the goal, or at least as part of the asset allocation, I think the goal was to move, if I remember correctly, about 5% overall of the allocation at the end of kind of a slow process.
I think we would have done our top of the head.
So most managers like to be around 15.2%, so I'd say we're close to halfway there. Yeah.
And then the last 2 positions would be, $75 million to the Russell 1000 large cap core strategy, and then keeping $112 million in cash account. Again, if we were to feel as though we should deviate from this, we would do that without talking to the trustees first, and we would keep you apprised of the pacing, over that 6-month period. That's the money.
Do you need to vote on that?
I think so. I think we had the last couple of years.
So, any questions on that? Is there a motion?
I'll make the motion to approve the recommendation of staff.
Moving properly seconded. Roll. Brian? Vanessa? Approved. Marcia? Approved. Roosevelt?
Approved.
Paul? Approved. Carol? Approved. Diana?
Well, what's that person?
I was thrown off.
I know.
Yeah. Yeah. And then threw you all off. So.
Yeah, that should came right.
Proposal to in the market volatility. We did 4.5%. Jeff, take note of that, by the way. You know, I'm only half kidding on that. 4.5%. The, you know, to gradually go into the market is not bad.
Yeah, I mean, we've talked about it a lot, Dave and I, with my other folks on staff have chimed in. I would encourage them to go on the interest rate analysis, challenging Marquette on some of the managers, the selection. So, yeah, I mean, it's a balancing act. We talk about we don't want to market time, but at the same time, you want to be prudent. You don't want to invest kind of at the worst possible time. That one uncertainty. I think that interest rate allows us a little more flexibility in that.
Any new business for us? We move from property second to return. We are adjourned. Call the full board back into session. There's motion to approve actions to testing committee.
I make a motion to approve the actions taken in the investment committee.
Thank you. Okay. Call roll. Ryan. Diana. Vanessa. Marcia. Roosevelt. Approved. Paul. Andrea. And Carol. Got it. Any new business? Any old business? And we are adjourned. Thank you very much.
Rob, folks that I know it's not part of the service, they want to stick around.
Okay.
I heard you guys giggling. I wasn't giving up. We were all, the three of us, started laughing. I heard you giggle.